Hello again, everyone. Edwin Learnard back once again. In this YouTube astrological segment, I'm going to be talking about Taurus and relationships part 2. And yes, this does apply and pertain to the Sun, Moon, and Ascendant. But anyway, basically, many of you, or at least some of you may remember when I did the part 1 series, well, the original series for the zodiac signs and relationships, I was talking really strongly about how the zodiac signs acted in specific relationships going through the various houses in the charts for these signs. But in this one, I'm basically being very generic in terms of how the zodiac signs are in relationships in general. So anyway, well, first thing about Taurus and relationships part 2. Well, Taurus in relationships, generally speaking, can be very persistent, loyal, and steadfast, and often very trustworthy. You could usually trust them if you got certain valuables and you're in a shared resources situation with them, if you're a significant other of Taurus, or you're in some kind of business connection. They are the ones that are often very honest regarding things in terms of possessions and things of a monetary nature. They could be very trustworthy. Now, Taurus is the type that may not necessarily be the life of the party or party animals, so to speak, but they could really, they're generally not overly gregarious or extroverted people, but they can give very strong loyalty that may be unsurpassed. They can often exhibit tremendous powers of endurance and patience in relationships as well. They will often endure a lot of negativity in a relationship, more so than the other signs on average, and endure derogatory remarks, unnecessary criticism, more than most. I think a lot of them. Thing about Taurus is many people may notice that Taurus has a tendency often to stay in relationships for a very protracted period that may be detrimental to them. And there's a number of reasons for this. And the first thing that comes to mind, I think, is complacency with Taurus, is the fact they often become very self-satisfied with things. And it really, I think with Taurus, is they think that in their minds that really making a transition or change, whether it be in a relationship or anything else, really the effort may outweigh the reward in their mind. I think a lot of it is just the fact that they have very difficulty in taking action. Remember that Aries often falls on the 12th house cusp in a solar or natal chart for Taurus. And Taurus is also, being exceptionally loyal and steadfast as they are, sometimes they just feel, I think, that they need to stay in the relationship, and if they, even if it is a rather negative one, due to the fact that they just don't think, I mean, they feel that maybe they're being disloyal if they happen to take off on someone. But when Taurus does reach that point of endurance that they can't take it anymore in a relationship, they may go and actually never say anything, just take off, not a goodbye when their departure takes place. Taurus can actually stay away in the relationship with the persistence and tenacity that they actually stayed in the relationship with. Very proportionate, I would say. I think Taurus can actually really go stone cold when they've had enough of somebody. I think what happens with Taurus is it takes them sometimes a while, because they're very methodical in a lot of things, and it takes them a while sometimes. I mean, I should understand, having Taurus Ascendant, that really, what Taurus eventually will become cognizant of, they'll say, hey, look, you've taken all this negativity from this person. Look at all the negative that this person has done to you. Why are you actually staying with this person? You don't have any connect. They don't even deserve to have you as a friend or significant other, or whatever the connection may be at that time. And then Taurus eventually becomes aware, where they just take some little while sometimes to really let this sink in and see it from that vantage point, and then they decide at that point to take off, and they can become stone cold, so to speak. And the thing about this is that though Taurus, being as loyal and steadfast as they are, they can be, I mean, they could deal with tribulation, crisis in relationships, problems them and the significant other may share, and do it with a lot of calmness. They are very calm and placid often, and really often even unflappable in crisis situations. They could often act as a tranquilizer for the more high-strung, excitable types such as Gemini, Sagittarius, or Leo. And also, too, Taurus, I mean, they have a very, their influence is supremely calming, I think, on others. And Taurus can exhibit very strong powers of perseverance in their relationships. And you may see a lot of other people that may have a strong difficulty enduring these trials and tribulations and predicaments in relationships. But Taurus often won't. And Taurus will often stand by their friends, their loved ones, through thick and thin. And they're also very relaxed as well. They're very strongly averse to worry. They generally don't want drama being brought into their lives. If you're a very outgoing and extroverted and gregarious people and you like to bring people into your home, this might actually bother Taurus. Taurus often likes to just be, I think, with their close-knit group, because really Taurus can have a very difficult time expanding outside the box, so to speak, as far as their connections go. Now, the thing about Taurus as well, they are often very reliable, and they may not necessarily be at the place on time for somebody if they're in, whether it's for a friend or a significant other, romantic relationship or what have you, but they often generally will be there at some point. If they say they're going to do something, they generally will at least do everything in their power to follow through on what they said they were going to do. And the thing about it is, as far as Taurus goes, I think with them, they're very methodical, very deliberate. They don't move with the quickness, say, is like a Gemini or an Aries, but they will often get more done for others in a longer period of time. Taurus can be connected with endurance. They will often stay with a painstaking project that others will just give up on maybe halfway or don't have the patience or persistence to stay with. But if they're doing something for a friend, or a significant other, what have you, they'll often do it with a lot of that tenacity and really be very thorough. It might take them a little bit longer because they're just making sure that they get the job done properly, but they will often follow through on it. It just might take them a little longer to complete whatever it is they're doing than the average person. Now, the thing about this too is, as far as like enjoyment, what Taurus might like, or it could be money games like Monopoly, Payday, and they may like even playing Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. I think too, creature comforts, they often like to stay in, where a lot of other people may like to go out in terms of things connected with their enjoyment. They're often homebodies and often can be enamored with domestic interest. Now, sometimes they could be borderline hermits or have hermit-like tendencies. They could be very introverted. They're very much like Cancer that way, but I think with Cancer, it's often more connected with what's close to home, and what really in the family life more is why they often stay in. They just do things maybe with their family a little bit more inside, and that's where the introversion often comes into play. But with Taurus, I don't think it really matters as much as far as whether it's going to be with family members or people close to home, or with even nobody. Having Taurus rising, Cancer sun, I'm dominated by my home life. I really honestly do not go out a tremendous amount of time. Maybe with Cancer sun and Taurus ascendant, maybe I just like to stubbornly stay in the home. But I think it's really the fact that I'm at home a lot might even be more. It's really a combination, I believe, of the Cancer and Taurus energy, but it really doesn't have to do with the family that much, because there's no family members that I am with during that time. So anyway, so it might actually be more of the Taurus energy hitting me as far as that goes. But anyway, the thing about Taurus too, going back to them, so this is about going back to the unnecessary drama in their life, they generally, there's a reason why Taurus and Leo are square by sign. Taurus likes to keep things nice and peaceful and tranquil. They don't want to bring drama into their life or and unnecessary excitement. That's why they Gemini in them, though adjacent signs, but there can be they could be neutral, I believe. But there are certainly with Gemini and Taurus trying to get together, there can be compatibility issues due to the fact that Gemini also is very loquacious and Taurus obviously isn't. And um, the thing about it is Gemini is very excitable as well, and it could get excited over things that Taurus wouldn't even think about more than once, and wouldn't even really barely bat an eyelash over, so to speak. Well, the thing about Taurus is that they like often want their relaxation, they want their peace and quiet. So if you're in a relationship with them or what have you, that's something that you have to often will have to respect with them. And really, and the thing too is going back to how Taurus can be like in their relationships in terms of staying in ones that could be detrimental to them for a while. Remember that Taurus can really the thing about Taurus too is that unlike Aries, they will take a lot of negativity from someone, and their temper is one which will it'll be held back for some time, but when it emerges, Taurus can really go ballistic, and it really can be very shocking and bewildering to those around them that have not seen this before. It finally, once they reach their point of endurance, forget it. And the thing about Taurus too is that they are also, and even though they're not easily aroused in terms of provoke, they can hold on, retain grudges for a very extensive period. And the thing about it is, now I got into it one time. I got into a fist fight with somebody in the 6th grade, and he had a Taurus sun, a Scorpio moon. And likely, I think either a Taurus or a Scorpio Ascendant is what I believe. I don't know his time, never did. But anyway, we got into it, and I think because I won the fight with him, maybe he felt demoralized because the fight took place in front of a bunch of people in the lunchroom, cafeteria at the time. He held a grudge against me practically that whole rest of the period in the middle school and high school. He was basically a perpetual nemesis and enemy of mine during that time. And we were talking, Taurus energy can be very passive and docile and gentle, but once they hold a grudge against you, this Taurus could be a sign that they can make very implacable enemies. They could be very calm, placid, and they're not really ones that want to go out or looking for trouble or making waves. But if you make an enemy of a Taurus person, you could have a very strong problem on your hands. They could be very formidable adversaries, and that would probably be a vast understatement. Now, also, Taurus can be very frugal, but they're not really known to be extravagant. So if you're in a relationship with Taurus, I wouldn't expect them to want to go to a lot of real expensive, sophisticated, classy places. They might be more of fast food type people, I believe. They're not ones to just say, well, you got to pay the whole bill either, but at the same time, generally don't want to go to the places that are overly extravagant and where you have to spend an exorbitant amount of money for food. Now, the thing you got to remember about Taurus too is that they are the legendary stubbornness and obstinacy connected with this sign. The one thing that could really be negative about them is that, and this of course could strongly grate on others' nerves, Taurus will often want to get the last word in, and they can have very strong difficulty in letting things go because they have it's not just the obstinacy, it's that persistent nature connected with them, and it seems to play a role in them hanging on to things, and whether they are good or bad. And Taurus too, Going back to, not Taurus generally is not one that's going to have a surfeit of friends and connections. I think a lot of this is attributed to having things less complicated in their life and less potential drama and less people that they have to worry about, because when you're more people you're with, it could be, especially if they're close connections, that their problems can become like your problems. And I think Taurus just likes to keep things more peaceful, and maybe that it plays a role, at least to some degree, in why I think Taurus will often limit their relationships and their connections. Going back to some other things that Taurus may like to do. Well, I mean, Taurus is connected with endurance, I believe, and something sports related, weightlifting or long distance running can be connected with certain endurance. And Taurus, I mean, long distance running and weightlifting are good examples, I think, because Taurus will have the ability to pace themselves, and they may like to do this with other people as well. And maybe even golf, because even though you wouldn't think quite golf with Taurus, it seems to be more with Leo, but golf can be somewhat relaxing, I think, and I think that would, and it's usually very quiet. People mean that it's something that's very peaceful and calming about that sport, I think. And I think, and it's not something where they have to really move, a lot very fast necessarily. So that could be something that Taurus may like, and that could be something that you may want offer to do with Taurus, perhaps, and if you're in a relationship with him or her. Anyway, people, that'll conclude this YouTube astrological segment for Taurus Relationships Part 2. Stay tuned next time where I'll be talking about Gemini Relationships Part 2. Two things I want to get with you on before I head out. Firstly, the stars may impel, but do not compel. And secondly, never isolate any single astrological element, aspect, planetary placement, position, configuration, influence, or what have you, and make an analysis of a person, astrologically speaking, based on this alone, because astrologically speaking, the person is the sum of all their components in their natal chart, and not just one. Until next time, people, stay well.